members and still growing. We just elected 15 more Democratic Socialist elected officials around the country, and many of them, including Lee Carter in the Virginia State House of Delegates, ran on single payer, beat a longtime senior Republican House Majority Whip by running on single payer in the state of Virginia. So DSA is very, very excited to be working on this, and obviously leftists all around the country are. So we're really excited to be able to talk about this. I'm going to maybe see, should we close the door? And then I'll leave it cropped. Is that better? All right, thank you. So, thanks everyone for coming. To my left is Emma Wilde.
Wild.
Emma is a health policy analyst based in San Francisco. She's a member of ISO. Michael Lighty, who is the policy director for National Nurses United and CNA. In the early 90s, Michael was the national director of Democratic Socialists of America when they were fighting for single payer before Hillary Care. Meagan Day, at the end of the table, who is a Jacobin staff writer. She's been published in Indies Times, Mother Jones, The Week, N+1, The Believer, and more, and she's also a member of Democratic Socialists of America. So I'm going to start with Michael, and you can take it away.
All right. Well, so we wanted to start about kind of a perspective on what is healthcare. And I think in this context, we need to understand that healthcare is actually not what we think it is. The healthcare system in the U.S. is not really designed to help people stay healthy or even necessarily as their first priority cure disease. We have to understand it as a pillar of the contemporary monopoly finance economy where the essentially the primacy of revenue and profit has taken over a caregiving profession. So hospitals are often the largest property owners in many communities. They're a driver in the economy. They are dependent and integrated into the bond market. The insurance companies, of course, are responsible to shareholders for delivery of profit, and that profit derives from limiting the amount of care that health insurance companies pay for. We have to understand they too, of course, are part of the finance economy, publicly traded corporations providing huge executive compensation to their CEOs. For example, the CEO of United Health in 2015 earned $66 million. The average CEO in the big insurance companies is over $20 million a year in compensation. And when you look at essentially the healthcare system as an industry driven by revenue and profit, it has direct impacts on how care is delivered and organized. So, for example, you're going to maximize revenue. You're going to put care not in the most appropriate setting, but in the least expensive setting. You're going to use things like electronic medical records to make sure that your reimbursements are as high as possible. When you de-skill the workforce, you're going to replace, say, registered nurses, like my union represents. We have 150,000 nurses around the country, with less skilled folks. You can pay less. You're going to fight unionization, and the union busters are as active in healthcare as they are in any other sector. Contrary to those approaches, if you're to organize healthcare on the basis of patient need, you would emphasize clinical judgment of caregivers. You would socialize the financing of healthcare like Medicare for All does, so that then we're able to create a system that does prioritize prevention of care, that separates getting the care we need from our ability to pay for it. And that essential separation would disrupt the industry model. And this model, we have to understand, is not only problematic in terms of healthcare, but is a driver of inequality socially. And mainstream economist Angus Deaton, who got the Nobel Prize in 2015, recognized this, that actually healthcare as it's organized now is the worst example of crony capitalism, that it perpetuates inequality by the latest innovations in technology or treatments go to the rich. The rich are increasingly spending more of their income on healthcare, where middle class and poor folks can. So what we have is a system characterized by intense financial barriers to care, high deductibles, high out-of-pocket expenses, huge numbers uninsured, 28 million nationally, and a political establishment committed to a agenda in healthcare driven by the donors, by the healthcare insurance industries, and even by Wall Street, which benefits so hugely from how the sector is organized. So we're taking on, when we take on the socialization of financing of healthcare, we're taking on a fifth, maybe a sixth of the economy, and that, of course, means huge resources against us. So our political strategy has to be based on popular mobilization, based upon articulating an alternative, and we think that alternative starts with the values of caring, compassion, and community, with a hard-edged analysis of the relationship of how healthcare is organized to the overall inequality and justice of the economy, and to then make our demand for Medicare for all the justice wing of the broader demand for justice in our society.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm sorry we're so crowded. Is there a seat over there? An empty seat in the back? No? Is there maybe one over there? No. Well, does anyone need to take a seat who's standing or sitting on the ground? Sure, okay. So we're going to move on. So now, Emma.
Okay, so I have the task in 5 minutes of talking about what it's actually going to take to win something like Medicare for All. And like Michael said, it's important to state from the beginning that we have not seen nearly the kind of opposition to single payer that we can expect from private health insurance companies, from big pharma, and from people who have a lot to lose when we're considering a fifth of the U.S. economy. That's a huge opposition that we can anticipate. And they have money. They have more money than we do, but we have more numbers. And ultimately, it is in that majority that we can look towards what would have to be a movement to win single payer. And that's really the first part. How do you win it? Well, you need a movement. But we aren't there right now. And thinking about how we can go from here to there, and really thinking through what kind of tactics and strategies get us there is important in the here and now. So I really want to make 3 quick points. And the first is that this will require building outside of the electoral arena. So winning single payer is not an inside game of getting the right set of politicians into office or really even getting the most perfect proposition onto the ballot. It's about building rallies. It's about building mass marches. It's about disruptive struggles in the streets that can bring in new layers of people who are mad about what we have and believe in the alternative that we're putting forward and are ready to fight for that. So getting those people to plug into organization is very important, and that's the sort of thing that a mass rally can do. So as an example, I could imagine a mass rally in Sacramento for Healthy California, which is the single payer effort in this state. And ultimately, we're also going to need action at the point of production. That's strikes. And I don't know about you, but millennials, we're not really familiar with strikes. Class struggle has been pretty low in this country, but I've read history and I've learned from others before me. And I think that we also see the seeds of this potential around us today. So you can look to the Bronx, where the nurses organized there to keep open the only pediatric trauma center there, and they did that successfully. You can look to the Bay Area and see Kaiser nurses who are holding rallies about safe nurse-to-patient ratios. And really, healthcare workers everywhere are going to be central to this fight, and particularly those that are unionized. So, as an example, I can imagine a single day of strike action in support for Medicare for All as something to aspire to. So that's point 1, building beyond the electoral arena. The second point is that this movement must build and maintain infrastructure that's politically independent from the 2 main parties of capital, the Republicans and the Democrats. And there are many reasons this is important. We were actually just talking about this before the panel, and I think it's going to come up in questions later. But I'll just say the number 1 primary reason, and that is because we must be able to, as a movement, chart our own course. The Democrats are not going to lead us to victory for single payer. And if we don't have any independent ground to stand on, and we keep sliding to the right, we're going to lose. So that really takes me to my 3rd point. And it's really contending with this big question of where does change come from? And because we're at the Howard Zinn Book Fair, I would like to quote Howard Zinn himself. And he says, quote, "What matters most is not who is sitting in the White House, but who is sitting in. and who is marching outside the White House pushing for change. And I think that quote says a lot of what I think the answer to, which is, change comes from below. History shows us that any meaningful reform, anything like single payer, has been won by masses of people, ordinary people who are activated and are fighting alongside for these demands, not waiting for a benevolent politician to give us the gift, but really to struggle from below. And we actually don't know what politician it would be who's there when we get single payer passed, but our task is to help build a movement that is both large enough but also strong enough and can inflict enough losses on the business class that it is so threatening that we win. And that's a really monumental thing to think about, but luckily we do have history that we can learn from, and I think it's also possible. And the recent resistance to Trump care and all the disgusting iterations of taking away health care from poor people and others in this country has showed us that the potential is there, the willingness to fight is there, and where we take that energy is actually a really important question for us right now. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Before I jump to Meagan, I just want to point out, Emma was talking about class struggle, and I think talk about staffing ratios. I think it's a perfect example of this, and we hear this in talking about privatized schools, that the working conditions for teachers are learning conditions for students. Similarly, the working conditions for nurses are the healing and healthcare conditions for patients, and I've been struck to find out that the conditions that both nurses and patients have in California, thanks to organizations like CNA, are far better than they are almost anywhere else in the country. Is that right?
That is right. Yeah, we have the only law in the country that limits the number of patients each nurse takes care of on her shift at all times. And so that doesn't exist anywhere else, and is really the basis for much better working conditions in California hospitals than anywhere else.
Thank you. And as Emma said, I think we'll return in the kind of question and discussion period back to the question of, Democratic Party electoral strategies. So I'm really excited to talk about that. But before then, let's go to Meagan Day.
All right, hi everybody. So my remarks are slightly more prepared, but I'll try not to be stiff. As Emma said, this is a monumental task facing us, and the question that I'm going to try to answer is, why would the left undertake such a task? Not just for the people that it would help, but for the left itself, right? So I think there's a misconception on the radical left that reforms are always a deferral of revolution. Some people think that a change to the current order, like single payer, which will help millions of people survive and thrive but won't actually end capitalism, is fundamentally opposed to the idea of a revolution, which is rightly conceived as a radical rupture. But this misconception relies on the mistaken idea that revolutions are instantaneous affairs. As socialist of yore Peter Camejo put it, first of all, you have to clear in your mind the meaning of the word revolution. Many people have a stereotyped picture of what a revolution is like. They say a revolution is when people come with guns, when they surround a fortress or take over a city. What they do is confuse revolution with insurrection. Insurrection is just one stage of revolution. Revolution is a lot more. It's a long process. So, to make a socialist revolution happen, you need two things. Actually, you need a lot more than two things, but here are two very important things. First, you need the working class majority to understand what's wrong with capitalism and see the need for its replacement. And second, you need the working class majority to be strong enough to really go toe-to-toe with capital and stand a chance at winning. When the left thinks about how to choose the issues and demands to focus our energy on, we should always be asking whether any particular campaign serves these purposes: building revolutionary consciousness and confidence on the one hand, and building material working class power on the other. So this is why it's not a contradiction in terms to speak of revolutionary reforms. There are some reforms that position us better to square off with capitalism. The Austrian socialist Andre Gors came up with a term for this kind of reform. He called it a non-reformist reform. That's kind of a mouthful, but it actually makes sense, because reformism is when your mission is to tinker with the system to make people's lives better, but to not really alter the basic structure at the end of the day. And reformists prefer changes that give people a much-needed helping hand, but don't really undermine capitalism. But there are other kinds of reforms that actually shift the balance of power in a dramatic way, even if they don't by themselves demolish all of capitalism. They do the things that we talked about a moment ago. They broaden the popular political imagination, and they give shape and solidity to working class institutions and political formations. The American left had the wind knocked out of it in the middle of the 20th century, and we haven't really recovered. But in the mass popularity of the Bernie Sanders campaign and the growing favorability rating of the word socialism, we detect stirrings of life. But we have to be strategic, or else we'll waste this opportunity. That means we have to pick our battles very intelligently. We need to be able to focus on these non-reformist reforms that Andre Gores talked about, which are both ambitious in theory and achievable in practice. For a nearly drowned political movement, a really good one of these could be a life raft. Well, great news. Staring us right in the face is the most popular decommodification-oriented demand in decades. Decommodification is a really important concept here. The word means to take something out of the market, to shield it from the predations of private enterprise, to ban the involvement of corporations, and to give it wholly to the people. It's what socialists want to do with literally everything, from housing to transportation and beyond. And guess what? Millions of people are demanding that we do that right now in 2017 with health insurance. In record numbers, we see that ordinary working class people want health insurance to be provided by the state to the detriment of insurance CEOs and to the benefit of everyone else. For those of us who see the importance of non-reformist reforms to moving the revolutionary needle, single payer is a godsend. Single payer healthcare will help millions of people. It will save lives. But then all progressive forms help people, from a raise in the federal minimum wage to increasing funding for food stamps. Single payer isn't smart for leftists just because it helps. It's smart because it attacks the core logic of capitalism in a serious way. It forcefully reaffirms the principle that there exist zones that are off limits to capitalism. In a society which is being increasingly subjected to the whims of the market and its victors, single payer actually gives a bunch of wealthy people and corporations the boot. In an age when curbing the appetites of private enterprise is considered anathema, single payer forcibly dismantles an entire industry. And it doesn't just offer relief to working people, it increases their ability to intentionally act in conflict with the ruling class. So if unions don't have to negotiate for better health care contracts, which is a lot of what they do, what else can they fight for? If an employee doesn't have to worry about losing health insurance when they lose their job, how much bolder can they be in standing up to exploitation in the workplace? The liberatory potentials of reforms like this, which decommodify whole arenas and expel corporations from the premises, are not just cumulative, they're exponential. Some reforms are an extra chunk of change here, an extra subsidy there, but a reform like this upsets the balance of forces between the working class and the ruling class. Far from circumventing revolution, it builds a crisis between labor and capital. Single payer doesn't end capitalism, not even in healthcare, but it puts us on the right road to a decisive conflict with capitalism. It takes control of a major system away from the private sector and places it in the hands of the public. And in doing so, it emboldens the working class to imagine new dimensions of political possibility, new claims on the future. At this critical juncture, the left must fight to win, and that means learning to spot a winning campaign when we see them. Thank you.
All right, I think I'm convinced that this is something I want to work on. Who's with me? Thank you very much to our three panelists, Emma, Michael, and Meagan. So we have until 3:45, I believe, so we have about 40 minutes. So we're going to have some discussion and some Q&A, hopefully. So first thing I wanted to do was to turn to Emma, and then maybe the rest of our panel can respond, and ask her to elaborate on kind of something she brought up and I think is implied in all the remarks of our other panelists, and I think something that we all think about a lot. In 2017, which is what, we have this burgeoning movement for single payer that can engage millions of working people, and we could really build working class power like Meagan describes. But how does that movement, or how should that movement relate to the Democratic Party, right? I mean, a lot of people might say we should not at all. Some people say we have to, make compromises, et cetera. So I think we have three different perspectives maybe on this, or maybe the same perspective, but I want to learn more about that question because it's certainly something that we have to think about in DSA. So I was wondering if Emma could start with what her thoughts on that question would be.
Yeah. The Democrats in single payer have a history. It's not, it's not new, and that history shows that time and time again, they've actually been on the wrong side of single payer and have actively worked against single payer. So there's a pattern of Democratic politicians saying they support it in their campaigns and really galvanizing people around it. And unfortunately, once they get into office, it drops from their platform. And that has happened a lot. There's been 5 single-payer bills in California since 2006. There's actually been more, but just since 2006, there's been 5. 2 passed the full state legislature and were vetoed by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was a Republican governor. But then times when there's been a Democratic governor, the 3 bills have been stalled at various points in the legislature by Democrats. So there's something to contend with there. And I think that, there's the example too. We have Jerry Brown, who's our current governor. He ran on a single-payer platform, actually, for president in the 90s, and was able to articulate all the benefits of single-payer and has now just completely forgotten that and cannot support the single-payer bill. But I don't think this is just an accident or a matter of individual Democratic politicians. Like, I actually think there's a logic within the party that is the beneficiary of the private health insurance company money donations. They receive actually just as much as the Republicans. Blue Cross Blue Shield actually gave more money to the Democrats last year. So you can see the ways in which they're actually responding to the group that their party represents, which is a capitalist class. So that's there's that there. And then the other reason that I think that it's really beneficial to have some independence within the single-payer movement is that there will be calls to water down single-payer. There will be calls to make compromises. 2 that come to mind is to actually strip away the universality of it and make it so it's only accessible to residents of the U.S., legal residents of the U.S., and then the other would be to strip away the comprehensive reproductive health aspect and to not include abortions, which are actually a part of healthcare. So I think those are 2 lines that we have to draw and say, actually, we're not willing to compromise around this. This must be part and parcel of Medicare for all. And I'm worried that we could anticipate people like, I don't know who it would be, but people within the movement actually telling us we need to be pragmatic, we need to make compromises, and if you don't have any independent place to stand on, you are going to slide to the right, which we've seen happen so many times with movements. So anticipating some of that can be helpful.
So from our perspective, it's a crucial question, and it ultimately comes down to the only way we're going to win this reform is if Democrats vote for it. And at the same time, both the history of this movement since the early 90s has been that with the Clinton ascendancy within the Democratic Party, a neoliberal approach to healthcare has been dominant. And that has also meant that the labor movement until 2009 did not support single payer between 92 and 2009. It was not the official position of the AFL-CIO as a direct result of the fight over Hillary Care in 92, 94. And at the same time in California, we have to understand that the political dynamic is completely dependent on the relationship of the Democratic leadership to SB 562, the single payer bill. So in other words, we had all this support on June 1st when it passed the Senate, and we lost much of that support on June 23rd when the Democratic Speaker of the Assembly stalled the bill. Then all of a sudden, organizations with an agenda in Sacramento said, well, yeah, we're for single payer, but we're not going to piss him off because we need our deal on X, Y, and Z. And so the dynamic in a legislative campaign is completely intertwined with what is the political leadership of the Democratic Party willing to do. And I totally agree with Emma that it's a donor-driven agenda, that these guys, it's true that the speaker gets a huge amount of money from labor and progressive donors, but he also gets a huge amount of money from Kaiser, from pharma, from the for-profit insurers, from the hospital industry, from the dentists, and all down the line. The medical device manufacturers, the biotech companies. And then he funds those swing seat elections, say in the Valley or in Southern California, with the corporate money that he's gotten. So those guys in those swing seats don't want to take a tough vote, taking on the insurance industry and pharma and so forth. So the political dynamic is driven by corporate money and politics. And we believe from the get-go that it would be very difficult to win unless we were able to limit the power of corporate money in politics, which is why we did Prop 89 in 2006 and so forth. But here we are today, and so what we found is that, again, Emma's right. We're not going to get single payer in California unless if we have a Democratic governor, unless he or she supports it. It's not going to happen. And that's what we're learning this year, is that the bill is stalled in large part because Jerry Brown doesn't want it on his desk. Secondly, we know that we're going to have to take out some legislators on this issue to actually send a message that the base demands this. That I've not seen an issue that the Republican base supports at 70% that the Republican Party isn't committed to. But that's the situation among the Democrats, that their base supports this at 70% levels and they won't do it. So we have to take that on. We have to take that on electorally. We have to build the movement. We were out in every assembly district 3 or 4 weeks ago with over 1,000 people knocking on doors in every assembly district for petitioning. This is a groundswell movement. That's going to sweep out the Democrats who disagree with us. And that's not because we think the Democratic Party is the be-all and end-all. It's a practical matter. They have the two-thirds majority. We got to get that two-thirds majority to act in our interest. And since the Bernie Sanders campaign, and the movement around it has put this issue on the table, we have put this issue from 0 to 65, literally, in the course of 18 months. It is extraordinary what has happened to build this popular movement. We're not there yet, granted. But we are literally on the precipice of something we haven't seen since World War II, and that is a mass movement to demand guaranteed health care for all. It's an extraordinary moment, and the opportunity is profound, and we're damn right we're not going to let the Democrats stand in our way.
Well, okay, so I'm a member of DSA, which, as you guys might know, is somewhat ecumenical with regards to the Democrats. There's not like an official line on how to relate to the Democrats, though obviously the skepticism is shared by the vast majority of people in DSA. So I knew this question was coming, and I prepared to hang back a little bit. Because I'm still like everyone in DSA, I'm still listening, learning, thinking, and trying to figure out what the appropriate approach would be. But one thing that DSA has done is that in the Medicare for All national campaign that is just getting off the ground, which we recently passed on a national level, there are 5 principles of our campaign to which we hold Democratic Party politicians accountable. And I'm not really sure what the accountability mechanism is just yet, but I think threatening jobs is a really good place to start, which means engaging in electoral work, actually. So these are the 5 principles. They're very good as far as I'm concerned. Right, so basically to keep us from sliding right, we have criteria. The first is a single program, no patchwork. It's one program. It has one name. It doesn't have lots of subparts. They aren't stitched together. It's a single program. The second is comprehensive coverage, which means everything from penicillin to abortion. The third is free at the point of service, which means no copays, no deductibles, and no premiums. And that's financed through taxes on the rich. And the fourth is universal coverage, including for non-citizens. And the fifth is a jobs replacement program to make sure that everybody lands in a good place. And as long as we're approaching the conversations with those principles in mind, I think we can at least have some sort of principled approach or a North Star to follow as we try to figure this out as a growing organization.
Thank you. So I have 2 more brief questions, then I want to take Q&A from the audience. So this one is actually for Meagan. Meagan just wrote an article. It's called Luxury Socialized Healthcare for Jacobin. I really recommend you read it. And this actually, I was reminded by something that Michael was saying, and everyone's saying, is that, like, we're not just doing this because it's fun. It's sometimes fun, although usually it's not. We're not just doing it because it's morally righteous, as Megan was saying. We're doing it because we actually want to win. And I think that we have to remember what the problem is and what the stakes are and what it's going to take to win, but why we're doing it. And I think something that's really important that Meagan's article, Luxury Healthcare, I'm going to ask her to explain a little bit about it, is that it reminds us that socialism, while it's about love, we all talk about socialism, but it's also about hate. We hate these motherfuckers, right? And the fact that they're making $20 million while there are people that you know in your lives that are going through hell just to not die. Right, and every story that your friend or you yourself or your grandmother had to go through, everyone else in this room has a story like that. And that is insane, and that should fill us with rage. That should drive us through the parts where it's less fun, hopefully. And reading Meagan's article, I thought, Jesus Christ, they have these things in Europe and Japan that if we could just get 1/10 of that, that would at least make our lives better. And the fact that the reason we don't have it is because of these people that we should be very angry at. But Meagan, can you tell us a little bit more about what you learned studying healthcare in other countries?
Yeah, lots of countries have figured it out, and we have not. So I mean, they haven't figured out the entire thing, right? Because like I said in the talk that I just gave to you guys, single-payer healthcare doesn't even get rid of capitalism in healthcare, and whichever sphere capitalism touches is going to see manifestations of inequalities, and in the field of healthcare, that's going to involve, death, right, and injury, and emotional and psychological trauma. So in places, there are lots of different models all throughout the world, and some of which are better than others, and some of which are better in some ways than others. But some things that I learned that I actually didn't know that kind of blew my mind, and maybe if you guys know more about global healthcare systems, this will not come as a surprise to you, but it did come as a surprise to me that, for instance, in France, there is no such thing as a deductible. Your insurance kicks in at the first euro billed. And there's no such thing as out-of-network because there's no such thing as in-network because there are no such thing as networks, right? So you can go to literally any healthcare facility in all of France, and both citizens of France and also worker residents who have visas can go to these health facilities and get treated by the doctor who's there. And here's what's really fascinating about that. The fact that it's not carved up into networks and it's not carved up into individual insurance companies that have their own sort of bounded private systems with their own independently operating CEOs and shareholders means that the government is now can issue you a card. It's called a carte vitale. It's a life card, and it has your medical history on it, and you can walk into any healthcare facility and you can hand them your card and they can put it into a machine and they can see your entire medical history with your permission, and this allows them to give you appropriate care without going through the massive administrative maze that you have to go through in the United States in order to switch doctors. Now, of course, in the United States, you have to switch doctors pretty much every time you switch insurance, and you have to switch insurance pretty much every time you switch jobs. And of course, all of the administrative work in the United States that has to be done to manage that totally nuts system costs an enormous amount of money. Because, I think in France, it's like 2% of the costs of these insurance funds. They're not corporations, they're funds. Is 2% of their costs are spent on administration. In the United States, I think it was an average of 30%.
Well, on administrative alone, it's about 14.
Okay, and then what's the 30% number there?
Profit, marketing, the rest of it.
The whole thing. Yeah. So that was something that made me really mad because there are so many luxuries. They're not luxuries, they're rights, but to us they seem to be luxuries involved here, and it's everything from being able to get the treatment that you need universally covered and not have to hit a deductible before you start paying, to universal coverage for pretty much every person in France, though with some exceptions, and then just down to the convenience. Like, if a woman has a baby in France, there are neighborhood clinics that she can go to without waiting for an appointment. She doesn't have to schedule an appointment. She can go and she can just wait a short amount of time and she can go in and see her healthcare provider. And also, I learned the question of postnatal care in other countries is utterly enraging. In the Netherlands, they have something called a Krav Maga-ster. I tried. And this is a person who is hired by the state and sent to your house for 8 days following the birth of your child to help you with everything from tips on breastfeeding to folding your laundry and making you lunch. And this is paid for by the state, and guess what? It's universal. So if a woman who works as a Krav Maga-ster has a child herself, she gets one of those too.
How much does it cost if you have insurance to have a baby here?
Oh, it's the estimate, if you have insurance, is $3,000 out of pocket. But if you don't have insurance, the sky's the limit. And also people who do have insurance are often hit with via technicalities, and especially if there are complications, which of course is a huge emotional strain as well. I mean, I spoke to somebody who has insurance, lives in the Bay Area, has a stable job, and had a child who was born prematurely who paid $14,000 out of pocket and had no idea that was coming down the pipe. No idea. Do you have $14,000 just lying around? You know, like a lot of people don't, and a lot of people have to make decisions about whether or not to have a child, not based on whether or not they're ready to take care of a child, but whether or not they have $14,000 or maybe $50,000 just in the bank in case something bad happens. And these are people with insurance.
Can I just jump in on that?
Yeah, are you pissed?
I am. I live in a constant state of annoyance. I'm the worst person to ask. I have to go around, talking about this. I mean, it's insane. It's infuriating, and they basically have made healthcare a public good. That's what they've done. They recognize you can't subject to the market, you can't subject to the revenue profit model of the industry. So next time somebody tells you, well, yeah, there are lots of ways for universal coverage. We could do the Swiss system. They have private insurance companies. They are nothing like American companies. The government's the primary payer. The CEOs don't make those kind of salaries. The government sets the benefits. The government sets the rates. They're basically administrators, and they're not deciders of care. And that is the difference, is that essentially the insurance model decides whether we get care or whether we're denied care. Somebody's going to make those decisions. In the other countries, it's a democratic system of guaranteed health care for all. And on that basis, you make decisions about the allocation of resources for health care. In this country, the private entities, based on their bottom line, make those care allocation decisions in an anti-democratic way, in an anti-humane way. And that's kind of the fundamental difference. Ultimately, it's the difference between humanity and inhumanity when it comes to healthcare.
Thank you. So I think I had, let's see, so maybe I'll skip my last question. We can just go to the audience. So let's see. So I'll start with Stephanie, and I'm gonna do them. I'll call a few people, and then we'll allow the panelists to respond. So Stephanie first.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to something Emma said about the organization at the point of production, and just sort of thinking about that, because I think there are a few questions like around, if you look to a strategy of like, the Democratic Party and electoral politics and getting the right folks in office, like that are related. So, what happens then, say you got the vote through and then the pharmaceutical industry is able to like regroup and, who's able to, hold the legislature accountable as like it changes. Well, if there was mobilization at the point of production, like what impact does that have on the workers, on the mobilization of the unions? What kind of process would unions have to go through in order to win such a reform? Like, what would that set people up to do afterwards? So, like, not just like defending single-payer health care, but like also, setting expectations for the future. So those are some questions that, I think it's worth thinking about as, not just this, can the Democratic Party be the agent of change in this matter, but like, is that even like the best way to go? Like, and could there be a different way that would actually set workers up to, be more prepared for that sort of like idea of like a non-reformist reform, right? Like a reform that gets workers, the working class, the union movement ready for the sort of next level struggle.
Thank you. So, gentleman over here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something real quick that I appreciate and agree with a lot of the things that you're all saying, but one thing that I'm concerned about is a lot of the places, I don't know what countries you look at, you're mentioning France, but I have friends who are doctors in Sweden. I have people who are part of what they call the pigs country in the European Union, right? Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain, just to think about how the European Union has actually changed. So I think that you can see the European Union coming in, and they've actually these austerity measures that get pushed by the IMF and things like that have been happening in Western Europe too. So I think that just bolsters what you're saying, the importance of what you're saying, and we can't just take those places for granted, because what we can slip back on is there. So, anything that we do that strengthens here, we would need to do that to just keep strengthening countries like that. And then there's a whole bunch of countries that are kind of like in between and around the world, and other examples, that we can use that are good, bad, or otherwise.
And so I'll take Alex, and then this lady here, and Moira.
Yeah, I have a question for all of the panelists. Emma mentioned the idea of like a demonstration, a public demonstration, like in Sacramento, say. I think that people are right, that there's a lot of people that care very deeply about this issue, that are ready to do something about it. I think there's a lot of work that has already been happening, and we can get excited about the prospects for this movement. One thing that a demonstration in a place like Sacramento could do is show everyone and ourselves how big we really are, because I think we really are huge, and we haven't had an opportunity to show that in like the visceral way of all of the bodies together. I think that's most important for us in the movement, but it's also important for the people that are watching sympathetically or on the fence to see that this is a real thing. And I think there's a lot of, I think the East Bay DSA is showing people what you can do through like a local organizing, on knocking on doors and talking to everybody. And one thing that there's lots of, Michael's talking about going around talking to people around the country. Like there's lots of stuff that we can do, but we haven't yet shown like this is all of our bodies. Like there have been big demonstrations in the last year against the Trump administration. None of them have actually put forward something that we're for. And this would be a way to show that. So I just wanted to ask, like in 2018, what do people think about the idea of a demonstration in Sacramento? Washington would be great, but Sacramento's closer.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. And this is one of my passions, to have health care for all. I think we need a huge movement. We don't just need the Sacramento March. We need it all over the country, really, and especially in California right now, because I'm focusing more on SB 562 and hoping that we can get that for California, because I don't think that the Obamacare and all is going to work, and other people are being penalized with these insurances that have high premiums and deductibles and all that. So I think this is going to be equivalent to a march or a movement just like the civil rights movement. I think it's going to be that big for this to work. And people have to be educated. And just for my own self, for the first time I went out the other day in the Haight-Ashbury where I live and got 9 businesses to sign up, for SB 562. But most of those people that I talked to, and they weren't the business owners, don't know anything about this. And you would think in the Haight they would. So I think it's so important that we have to educate the masses here, and we don't have our television is not going to do it. We're going to have to, have alternative media to do it. We don't have the Bay Guardian. We have 48 Hills, which many people don't know about. I mean, just certain people, progressives, might know about it. So we need to find a media. We have to get a strong media, and we have to support KPFA because they're about to go under because of their flagship station in New York. It owes millions of dollars in rent. And so we've got to, I'm just saying, one other question I'm sorry I have is when people ask how we're going to fund this, this is the biggest thing that people will say and then just turn their head and walk away. And I know one thing is a state tax, and others paying a premium, and you're saying tax the rich. But, of course, the rich is going to go after us and try to squelch this. So I'm wondering, what ideas would you say to the average person how we're going to pay for this?
Thank you. And thanks to our left media co-sponsor of this event, Jacobin, and the Howard Zinn Book Fair for bringing together all of these different media outlets. So I had Moira.
Oh, yeah. I think Emma and maybe some other folks mentioned reproductive rights, and I guess especially given some of the controversy in DSA around the Heath Mello stuff earlier this year and the ways in which certain folks on the left still mistakenly, I think about reproductive rights as like a cultural issue. Like this is a thing I've seen on Twitter just yesterday. I guess I was curious also how historically strong neoliberal Democrats have been on the rhetoric around Planned Parenthood and abortion, though not reproductive justice, which is a different thing. I was curious just about your ideas for like how reproductive rights or abortion or contraception access might be used to like divide activists, the 70% who are for single payer, and then also what strategies or what ideas you have about sort of depoliticizing those issues or making clear that they are part of healthcare, part of this like holistic set of justice issues around healthcare as opposed to a unique cultural issue.
Thank you. So then I had a gentleman over here with a blue shirt.
So I work as a housing organizer in San Francisco, and I kind of look at the single payer fight in California as similar to the fight to repeal Costa-Hawkins, which is the big state law restricting rent control, mainly because you have similar industries. Like you have huge mega industries with tons of power who really control Sacramento. And you have politicians in the Republican Party who are openly hostile to the aims of folks working on the ground for change, and you have Democrats who say nice things but then stab you in the back. And I'm asking this because something you brought up. One problem we're having around the rent control fight, David Chu, who's the local assembly member here, was actually one of the sponsors of the bill to repeal Costa-Hawkins, but he's actually not willing. He's the head of the housing committee, which means he has a lot of power to actually bring a vote in his own committee, and he hasn't lifted a finger to actually do it, right? And so, I mean, I guess the question is, like, when we have, so two questions. One is, you know, to their credit, most of the groups who've been organizing around this are trying to pressure David Chu to actually lift a finger and just schedule a vote in his own committee. On the other hand, there's not really the kind of grassroots movement that would force him to do that. It's more like, you know, in each city you kind of have a handful of staffers for nonprofit that are making the strategic decisions around the movement, even though there are tenants involved in some of those organizations. And I guess it's like, one is what leverage, if we support some Democrats and try to take the ones who are openly against us out and replace them with people who are better, what leverage do we have over those who claim to be our allies if the party as a whole really isn't accountable to us? And then the second related question is, how do we build a movement to really force them to do that? Like, what would it look like? Because the nurses have made a lot of ground in building power in the workplace and pushing this bill, right? But then how do we actually, how do we get nurses and patients working together, like in powerful committees that make democratic decisions and that actually force the issue and have leverage over those politicians?
Oh, great, thank you. So I'm going to give a few minutes for each of our panelists to respond to whatever struck your fancy, and then hopefully we may have a little time for more discussion, or we can maybe hang out. I don't know when the next panel is, but do you want to start us off, Emma?
Sure.
There's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah. Do you want me to review?
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, sorry if I mess anyone up. That's just what your question is now if I say it differently.
Jeremy's version.
Yeah. So Stephanie asked about organizing the point of production, as opposed to just electorally or in other ways. Someone else asked about in the EU, kind of they're losing out on the gains of healthcare and the social welfare that they had built up over the last century. Alex asked about demonstration in Sacramento or Washington. So you asked about funding and taxes. Moira asked about reproductive rights. And this gentleman asked about how do we hold Democrats accountable? And then what was the second part of the question?
And then how do we build the right kind of movement that gets, can we see the kind of movement where patients and nurses are kind of like working together and democratically making decisions?
Yes, thank you. All right, so Emma, you take on whatever you'd like.
Yeah, I'll start with the funding question. There's one
sorry,
thing.
I'm going to give 3 minutes each,
Okay,
just because then we'll be
I'll be quick.
in time.
First thing to say is we spend a lot of money on healthcare, and we do so poorly, we do so inefficiently, we send a lot of it just off into the coffers of the private industry, so that's the first thing. And the second thing is, I believe, how much was the military spending bill? Hundreds of billions of dollars. So I'm convinced that we also need to eventually tie the movement for single payer to a conversation around U.S. imperialism, because unlike some of the countries in the EU that actually have these very nice, relatively nice healthcare systems, they are not a war machine in the way that the U.S. government is. So there's two things. One, we spend a lot of money, and we could do so better if there was democratic control. And secondly, we'll have to talk about militarism and how much money we spend on that. Let's see. I think yes to the rally. I hope my panelists agree. And I think rallies are a great place to educate people. You might not know the ins and outs of SB 562, but you might know that you think healthcare is a human right. And meeting people at these rallies is a great place to learn more and to keep that conversation going. I'll leave it at that for now.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, specifically on SB 562, we do have a funding mechanism proposed, a payroll tax, about 6.6%, Also with the sales tax, where low-income folks are given a tax refund to compensate for any tax they pay, spent in a highly progressive way. Essentially what we're talking about is eliminating all premiums, deductibles, and copays. You have no out-of-pocket costs, just as Meagan said, free at the point of service. And so you're basically in a system where you're going to pay less and get more. It's quite extraordinary. That's why the healthcare debate's so frustrating, because on policy, it's a winner. They don't want to have the policy debate. They don't want to talk about the UK being the #1 system in the world, because it's the most socialized system of any healthcare in the industrialized world. They're #1. And the neoliberals and the austerity folks are taking them on precisely for that reason. Australia's #2, single payer. Netherlands has private insurance, but it's, again, not like our companies. And so these systems are quite effective, and because they're effective, they're under attack, just as you say. We do have to come up together with some kind of coalescing event. I think you're right. We've had some big demonstrations over the course of the 562 campaign. It's gotten the attention. We've been in Speaker Rendon's office down in LA with some pretty good street demonstrations out there, but some kind of coalescing, I think, is going to be really, really important. What I think the opportunity we have is, it's like Costa-Hawkins. I mean, there's a difference between David Chu, who we work with closely, is a co-sponsor of 562, but someone like David Campos would have taken a different approach. I mean, that's just the way some of these differences get played out, right? But the reality is that David Chu is ultimately going to be accountable to the folks in his district, and his folks in his district aren't at 70%, they're like at 80% on 562. And precisely this question you raised, both about industrial action and on this alliance, this essentially nurse-patient alliance, this is the fundamental question for labor. Are you going to be in partnership with the boss, or are you going to be on the side of the public? And labor management partnerships are part of the neoliberal agenda, especially prominent in healthcare. A key feature of Kaiser. Kaiser is the #1 opponent to 562. These are related. You have to have a different relationship to the boss in order to create that alliance with the public that's actually going to move the issue and build a movement. And I think labor's got to take that very, very seriously.
All right, I'll answer a couple of questions that struck my fancy, as Jeremy put it. So over here, when you were talking about the way that some of the better universal healthcare coverage programs around the world, and especially in the EU with anti-austerity measures, are imperiled, that's absolutely true. And there have been enormous strides made in a variety of nations, and throughout the 20th century that were then dramatically repealed, sometimes through revolutionary measures, and sometimes through the slow attrition of neoliberalism and capitalism. So I just wanted to say that to validate that and say that's absolutely true, and also that social democratic programs are not a silver bullet, and you don't win them in succession or in a sequence, because they don't fall over like dominoes. They're engines of solidarity. This is a phrase that one of my comrades in DSA came up with in an article that he wrote for Jacobin. The idea being that you create out of essentially thin air a constituency that now thinks of itself in solidarity universally, and ceases to it's like a mental shift, ceases to think of social care as a zero-sum game. So it's not that if I get this, that means that it's because other people didn't get it and then them's the breaks, or if those people are getting it, that means it somehow takes away from me. If you can successfully implement a program and show how it works, and that it doesn't work like that, then you can transform the popular consciousness in a very serious way. And you see that even in places where the anti-austerity programs are waging a full-on assault on some of these programs, because capitalism, if it still exists, is going to do that no matter what. But you do see people in countries like Britain and in France, which have two very different systems. Both, the vast majority of people in those countries, while they have problems with the way that some of the programs work, and I was reading this book called The Healing of America by T.R. Reid, and the quotes from British and French citizens about the question of solidarity among citizens and residents, and the idea that the fate of all of us is bound up in each other's and working together to provide care for all, and that means that when I need care, I'll be able to get it. So the idea so just to sum up, the idea of pursuing these reforms is not to like knock one down and then knock another one down until eventually we get to have, the capitalism's gone. There's going to be an assault on these institutions even after they've been successfully implemented, and we're seeing that right now. But the point of them is to build a sense of solidarity and a sense of popular consciousness around the question of universal social care as a core principle and of society, essentially. And the other question that I wanted to answer is Moira's, and I don't have a whole comprehensive answer to that, and I want to talk with you more about it later, but I also wanted to say that, one of the principles that we have is comprehensive coverage. That's not universal coverage. Universal coverage is everybody. Comprehensive coverage is everything. Everything that involves a doctor and is necessary for your health. And the way that we make an inroad into that conversation is what's frustrating to people about the healthcare system, even if they have insurance, is claim denials. We don't fuck with claim denials anymore at all. If it involves a doctor and it involves your health, it gets covered, period. And the way that when people bring, abortion's going to be a flashpoint, definitely, no matter what, but when people bring it to us, we bring it back to them and say, if it involves a doctor and it involves your health, we don't not cover it because that's the way this system works. And what's the last time you had a claim denial, and how did that work out for you? Right? So like we don't do that anymore, and the only way it works is if it's true for every single thing, right? Because once you start taking them away, you can take other ones away, including that last time that you had a claim denial and how that fucked with your life. So, that's all.
And I would just add, Meagan and Maria, that we have nurses that we represent around the country, Texas, Florida, Missouri. These are hardcore anti-choice folks from a religious perspective. And they are supporting our campaign for Medicare for All, knowing that it's going to include reproductive health, including abortion. And we cover every person in both under SB 562, as whether you're documented or not, and under Bernie Sanders' Bill 1804, benefits begin at the point of immigration, period. So we have to make these demands. We see abortion, reproductive health care as a public health issue, as an issue of solidarity. And so that's what we got to have reflected in the fight and the bills.
You want to say anything else in response to the comments from other panelists?
Is it over?
We have 2 minutes left.
Okay. Are you going to go back to the?
No, I don't think we have time for it, but we can chat afterwards.
Okay, then I have a couple things to add that have been percolating. One, I think it's interesting to kind of step back and look at where we've come from and look at the Affordable Care Act under Obama and see the ways in which this was a massive compromise. It was actually crafted on a Republican's idea of what healthcare should look like. That gives you a sense. And it really maintained the for-profit logic of the most healthcare in the U.S. and that this new moment, which is really possible in part because not only our great organizing, which has been great, but also what the right has been doing. Trump's attacks on the Affordable Care Act and people saying, that wasn't great, but we're going to defend what we have, but we're also going to take this opportunity to start a conversation about what would more look like? What would the actual system we want look like? And that's been a real galvanizing moment, and it's taken both us putting our ideas out there and meeting these people, but also the fact that there's been an attack on what we have. And that's just provided an opportunity to have people's ideas change as they go out and they have sit-ins to defend the Affordable Care Act. People are thinking, well, what if there was more? What if we had long-term coverage for everyone? And just seeing that people are coming to their own conclusions is really inspiring. And then the second thing I wanted to touch on is that I want to talk about Gavin Newsom, if anyone knows who he is. He's running for governor. Sounds like you do. He supports universal health care. I don't know if he says single.
He does. He supports single payer and he supports 562. He said to the legislators, do it this year or I'll do it when I'm governor.
Well, I think that's someone to keep an eye
on. Maybe this should have been the question.
Yeah. No, Gavin Newsom, he's an example of a Democratic politician who he brought universal health care to San Francisco. It's abysmal, and I don't think many people who actually provide care in the city here would hold it up as any kind of thing to aspire to. But I just find it interesting. He's running on a platform now supporting single payer, and we'll see if he's able to bring that into a reality. And then the last thing which people have touched on is that, this is a reform. It's a huge, important, monumental reform that I think is very important. And it can be rolled back. It can be attacked. It can be, carefully cut up the way that Trump's trying to do to the ACA. So it's just that's really a plug for revolution. But just to say that there is the point of this whole movement is actually to get us to a whole different place where healthcare would look entirely different, where health justice could be realized, where we could live in neighborhoods that are not full of pollutants, we could live in homes, and just taking it to have a moment to imagine, like, what would that be like, and how can this be a step towards that?
Awesome, thank you. Round of applause. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to our panelists, Emma, Michael, and Meagan. Thanks to ISO, Participating DSA, and Jacobin. You have 13 minutes until the next panel starts.